Kirill Kaprizov returned, but Joel Eriksson Ek is now injured. Brock Faber, Marco Rossi, they are all here. What do we make of all of this roster turnover? We discuss today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Sports Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes all week long. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us to recap a ton of news from the weekend. We take a look at how the Wild did over the last couple of games. Brock Faber, Marco Rossi, Joel Eriksson Ek, Kirill Kaprizov will cover it all on today's episode. Today's episode is also brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/NHL60 and use code NHL60 for 60% off plus free shipping. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. As mentioned, we're joined by Alex Micheletti. It is a victory Micheletti Monday after the Wild took care of Jordan Binnington and the St. Louis Blues on Saturday night. Before that, though, a loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Alex, a ton of news to discuss here on today's show, but let's get to the super good news. Kirill Kaprizov is back, and we had a chance as well to see Gustav Nyquist in his debut over the weekend, and by all accounts, those two guys, two thumbs way up.
Yeah, I was so excited for Nyquist to make his debut. Just another guy to add to the, scoring attack, and he looked phenomenal. I mean, the passes he was making, he's just gonna be a big boost on the power play too. So yeah, I was very, very excited for his debut, and I'm glad it went well.
2 shorthanded goals in a 20-second span, a power play goal, more Jordan Binnington frustration, but obviously the big story coming out of Saturday's game, Joel Eriksson Ek trying to block a shot. He ends up having to be helped out of the game and now is officially week to week. And so right at the time when the Wild get Kirill Kaprizov back and it looks like, hey, we're going to be at full strength, not so fast.
Yeah, it's this team has faced so much adversity. It's incredible that they're still in the race for the first place in the Central. Who would have ever thought? And so they just keep rolling with the punches and trying to fit guys into the lineup, calling guys up from Iowa and getting guys back from long-term injuries. You just can't make it up, and you have to give a lot of credit to Dean Evison and the coaching staff for making it work and plugging guys in roles that maybe they never thought they would be in. But they're giving an opportunity to play in the NHL, and some of these guys are running with it. So yeah, all the credit there to those guys too.
Yeah, most definitely. It's tricky to have to try to navigate all of this, and we'll talk a little bit later about how all of these pieces fit together. Just want to kind of run you through all the big headlines to get you going. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg, as the Gophers unfortunately losing in the national title game to Quinnipiac in very Minnesota sports fashion. But as soon as that was done, then you have the news that Brock Faber has signed his entry-level contract and is with the team, accompanying them to Chicago. So a rough end to the collegiate career for Brock Faber, but looks like his NHL career is going to get started here very quickly.
Yeah, it was quite the turnaround to get home at 3:30 in the morning and then sign a contract a couple hours later, and then was on the we saw the photo released by the Wild, and he was one of the first guys on the plane to Chicago. So it's a whirlwind. I couldn't even imagine, picking up your life and and then and then going to the professional team after your college career ends. Well, on he ended it himself, but by signing his contract. But yeah, every Wild fan should be excited for this guy. He is the eventual replacement for Matt Dumba if the Wild do not re-sign Matt Dumba, and so it would be nice to if they can't secure first place in the Central, to see him get a game. It looks like he might get the game against the Jets, as reported by Michael Russo. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. But yeah, it's an exciting time for him. And just to get him acclimated with the team too, even if he doesn't play, he'll be around all of his future teammates. And so, yeah, it's very, very exciting time.
And then to cap all that off, Marco Rossi and Nick Petan will be joining the team in Chicago. And again, we'll talk in a little bit about fits, lines, and such. But just going through all of the big headlines over the weekend, Rossi and Petan joining the team, but it sounds like this was kind of the plan all along. Obviously not the Joel Eriksson Ek injury, but to have Kirill and Nyquist both play on Saturday, but then not play in both games of the back-to-back. And so some extra bodies to help with the front end of that back-to-back against the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, and like we were talking about with Faber, he might get in if the Central division is already kind of locked up on who's going to play each other. And it would be nice to, maybe get Matt Boldy a rest, so you could play a Nick Petan. That's what guys I'm kind of thinking. That they could, go in for. Same thing with for maybe rest Jonas Brodin, because as we saw in the past, especially with all these all these injuries that are occurring, you don't want another top 6 guy to go down, or top deep pairing guy to go down either. So yeah, just extra bodies is nice to have this time of the year for sure.
Yeah, and with Eriksson Ek potentially missing at least the start of a postseason series, you got to make sure that you have all of those top defensive options available, because if you lose one of those guys too, the toast goes from like a 4 on the toaster to more of like an 8 or a 9 in terms of being burnt. So
right, yeah, it's a war of attrition in the playoffs too, as we've seen in previous playoffs. It's who's the healthiest at the end, yeah, it's you just have to hold things together, and it's a roller coaster, as we saw last year with the goalies splitting games, and so we might have that again, this playoff. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating first round for sure.
A frantic run to the finish, and a lot to discuss. We'll look at the final few games of the season, as we got the final 3 on the slate for the regular season. We'll look at those. When we come back, we're going to talk about how the lineup looks with players out, players in. And so we'll take a look at the line combinations and who should play where as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild, after a word from our sponsor, which is the official sports betting partner of Locked On. That is FanDuel Sportsbook. It's baseball season. That means grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. And if you have been following the Minnesota Twins so far this season, you know they've been a pretty good bet to keep runs low and to score a ton themselves. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Wild. For your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked On NHL podcast to get the full lowdown in the final week of the regular season. Locked On NHL is free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for hanging out for another episode of Locked On Wild. Seth Topal and Alex Micheletti thanking you for making Locked On Wild part of your daily routine. All right. Roster moves. Joel Eriksson Ek injured. Sounds like week to week, which means he could be back at some point during the first round of the playoffs. But I don't know if you can really kind of hold your breath for that. If he comes back, that's great. But you got to find something that works on that line. So let's look at the candidates. You got Marco Rossi. You've got Sam Steele. Which way do you go?
That is tough to put Marco Rossi in the top 6 right away into the playoffs. Hopefully they can try to get him in here in the regular season, maybe get him more acclimated. But I think you trust Sam Steele right now, at least, if it was a playoff game. I want to see how Rossi looks in the NHL, because it's another big step. We'll see. We'll see what they do. Maybe playing against a team like Chicago that is absolutely tanking for Connor Bedard, you can try Rossi there and see how it goes. If it goes well, then obviously you can continue it. But the way Sam Steele has been playing, how do you not give him a chance there? Because every time he's actually played recently, he's done really well. So I would like to see Sam Steele, still get another chance.
And they've one-upped it, because I believe against the Blues, they put late in the game, I believe it was Freddie Gaudreau went with Boldy and with Marcus Johansson.
Mm-hmm.
And so you went that route. You throw Sam Steele in on the third line with Nyquist and with Foligno, and obviously Steele scored. But that's the thing, is that Steele is good in these little bursts where he plays a handful of games in a spot. Top line. He's maybe not good enough to be a full-time top line guy, but he can fill in there in a punch. He's maybe not good enough to be a second line guy, but he can fill in there in a burst. Bottom 6, probably way more where he's suited. But it's just like every time he gets put back in the lineup, and Bill Guerin said this much, every time he gets put back in the lineup, he produces.
It's tough. You're in such a conundrum, because you do want to see Marco Rossi. He is the future. You drafted him in the top 10 pick, and so it's tough. But the center position is the hardest position to play in the NHL. You look at the guys that he's going to be facing. It's incredibly hard, and so you'd like to go with the more veteran player in Sam Steele there, but it's tough. I don't envy the position Dean is in, and as we know, he tends to favor the veteran type of player. That's why Kalen Addison is not in the lineup. But you do have Marco Rossi there, and I kind of see him as like an insurance policy too. And if Dallas is the opponent and things don't go well, game 1, you could put a Marco Rossi in there or have him in there to begin with. So it's you kind of use these last couple games as an audition. I think that's a good way to look at it.
I agree. Obviously, the biggest impact that is going to be felt in that absence is going to be defensively, particularly on the penalty kill, but also on the power play as well. And so the Wild are going to have to really shift those special teams units. I would imagine this means we see more of the likes of Freddie Gaudreau, Brandon Duhaime, Connor Dewar, all of those guys kind of filling those PK spots. But this is another reason why you go out and get a guy like Gustav Nyquist. You can slot right in to that spot. We've seen Marcus Johansson get some more time on power play 1. And so as this team has all season, it's going to be next guy up to fill that spot. I mean, they had to fill Kirill Kaprizov's shoes for crying out loud for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, the way Matt Boldy played, they would not be in this position without the way he played. It's just he's been on an incredible run, and that chemistry between him and Johansson has really paid off. It stinks losing Eriksson Ek, but we'll see who's the next guy to take that step to. It's a giant hole, just like it was for Kaprizov. But like you said, next man up. It'll be by committee, and we'll see what happens. Eriksson Ek, he's had an incredible season offensively, but he's so much more important defensively for this team. Yeah. And so, you can't just have one guy, fill his type of role. So we'll see. I'm just very fascinated to see who is willing to step up into those roles, and especially if it's Colorado or Dallas, you're gonna have McKinnon, Rantanen, Dallas. You're gonna have their big line of Rupe Hintz, Joe Pavelski, and Mr. Jason Robertson. So it's not gonna be easy either way for sure.
Before we talk a little bit about where Faber may slot in, I did want to ask you, because we've seen over the last few games, it seems like the goals allowed are starting to rise here. You have the 2 games against Vegas, the game against the Blues on Saturday, the game against the Penguins. Do we have any concern level as to the tandem play of Philip Gustafsson and Marc-Andre Fleury at this point in the season, or are you worried at all about what we've seen over the last 5 games from these two?
The defense as a whole has been a little bit leakier, but you're playing some desperate teams and desperate hockey too. So that, that is amounting to, what I think is happening too. And you have, teams like the Blues too, even though they're out of it, you have guys playing for contracts too. So, it's making games, more intense, more scoring opportunities. I think, playoffs, as we know, it's always tighter. So the way Gustafsson and Fleury have been playing, towards the end of the season here, I don't think there's any worries.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be into, because I know the Avalanche have won the last 2 games they've played, but they had to fight to get past San Jose, and they were pretty much dead to rights to the Anaheim Ducks. And so getting to the end of the year against teams that are playing for everything and against teams that have nothing to play for, it gets dicey sometimes, because you have a bunch of young guys that don't know any better other than to just kind of step up and do their thing, or you have teams like Pittsburgh who are potentially playing the final few games of the core that they have. It's tricky, and I'm not trying to excuse those types of losses. That's just that's just the way things go sometimes.
No, 100%. And as my dad always says, the players aren't tanking. The GMs, the front office might be, but like you said, some of these young guys, they haven't had their feet wet into how the NHL works, and they want to make a really good impression. And then you have, like you mentioned too, you have a guy like Sidney Crosby that does not want to miss the playoffs at all, and so he's fighting every shift to will that Penguins team into the playoffs. And so, yeah, it's an interesting time of the year, and you got to love it though, because, this is the best time of the year, the drama, the intensity, you love it.
Winnipeg hanging on for dear life. We love to see that sort of thing. We'll talk about the final few games of the season. We'll talk a little Brock Faber as well. as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. And welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Thank you once again for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked on NHL podcast as we push towards the postseason. Who's in, who's out, who's hanging on for dear life? Looking at you, Winnipeg Jets. Locked on NHL is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. And once again, thanks for making Locked on Wild your first listen and making us part of your daily routine. Seth Topal hanging out with Alex Micheletti. So which line would you put Brock Faber on if we were going to get him in for a game, get somebody some rest over these last 3 games? Who do you pair him with?
That is really tough. I would love to see him with Brodin just because that's what we want to see in the fall. But if you just want to get him in, put him on the third pairing, maybe playing with the John Merrill and give him 13, 14 minutes and just kind of get his feet wet. It could, like we talked about earlier in the episode, that looks like his parents are going to the game against Winnipeg. So that gives you a good sign that he might be playing in that game. So yeah, I think the most logical would be third pairing there with either a Goligoski or a Merrill.
That'd be fun to put him with Klingberg.
Yeah, Klingberg too.
That elite offensive presence. Note for listeners, Locked on Wild will be in attendance for the Winnipeg Jets game tomorrow. So we'll have some content from the XL Energy Center after the game. So make sure that you stay tuned. And hopefully the Wild will have put the final nail in the coffin of the Winnipeg Jets, although they did win on Saturday night, so they now have that 2-point cushion over the Calgary Flames for the final spot in the West that nobody wants.
No, it's crazy, isn't it? It's the Calgary Flames. It's a soap opera with that team, and then same thing with the Jets too. It's another team that looks like if they don't make the playoffs, their core is going to be completely torn apart. You have a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois who has been flirting with Montreal for a long time here, and we'll see if that actually comes to fruition or not. And so all sorts of drama with multiple teams, fighting for that last spot. You have a team like Nashville too, who traded everybody and is still fighting with guys that haven't played in the NHL, rookies stepping up, and it's just, and UC Saros doing everything he can to will the Predators to a playoff spot. It's crazy.
Yeah, that spot is just that last spot is going to be just it's going to be an adventure. So the Wild's 100 points right now, 2 points behind Dallas, 4 points behind the Avalanche. Everybody has 3 games to play. To have a chance for the top spot in the Central, the Wild have to win out, and they need some help. I know Colorado plays Edmonton one of those final few games, so maybe, but it's looking at this point like, barring the Wild getting a game back, they will be the 3rd seed in the division. Looking like they're going to be the 3rd seed and looking like they're going to play Dallas in the first round, which take that for what you will. But the Wild are facing a Chicago Blackhawks team that is trying to fight to the top of the mountain for the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. So that is on the road, but that is a Chicago team that wants nothing to do with a win. You're playing the Winnipeg Jets on Tuesday. The Winnipeg Jets are desperately trying to make this as dramatic as possible for that final spot. And then you're playing the Nashville Predators on the road to finish the season. Nashville also trying to make this as dramatic as possible, although that I believe that loss on Saturday, I believe it was the Jets that beat Nashville. So they gained that head-to-head. cushion against the Predators, but still Nashville's fighting for that final spot. The Wild could conceivably, depending on how things go, they could conceivably knock 2 teams out of the playoffs in consecutive games if Calgary can kind of get things figured out. But regardless, you've got one team with nothing to play for, and then the final 2 games against teams that don't seem like they want to play any further.
Yeah, it's an interesting week for sure. The Blackhawks, they have their fans booing for them scoring goals. You can't make that up. Thank goodness, for Wild fans that not in that position at all. This team, they're never bad enough to finish in the top 3, but not also in this position, too, where fans are just wearing bags over their heads and just complain. It's crazy. They're right there, and with Craig Leopold as the owner, they're always going to be in the playoffs. I think he's always pushing to be right at the cap max and doing everything they can to get that team to be a playoff team. And so, yeah, it's and then you get the Jets, like we talked about, with all their drama and our good mem god Rick Bowness. Just wake up, babe. There's a new Rick Bowness mem coming out. Let's
grab that.
Love that guy. And then Nashville, like we said, it's a hungry team. They always seem to be just a terrible matchup for the Wild. For whatever reason, the Predators always have the Wild's number. It's a completely different team now too. Yes, Rick Bowness, the mem god. We love a Rick Bowness mem. It's the best. So this is the week of the Central Division collision, as Kevin Fallness has trademarked.
Hi, Kevin.
Yes, hi, Kevin. We love Kevin. So. Hashtag Jack. So yeah, it's gonna be a heck of a week for sure.
Let's do this. I want to put us on the spot because let's do a couple of things here. What do you think the Wild's record will be over these final 3 games? Because I want to do a comparison to where the Wild were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Given what we think will happen. So 3-0, 2-1, 1-2, some combination of those numbers. What do you think for the final 3?
Yeah, I like a 2-1. I think they can beat Chicago, obviously, and I think just with how depleted Nashville is, I think they have Nashville's number there. I think they lose a close. I think I'll say a shootout loss against Winnipeg. I just think this Winnipeg team is going to be the one to make that final spot. I like their goalie better than Markstrom. Hellebuck is, say what you want about the rest of his team. He continues to just, plug away even with all the drama that they have. He's a phenomenal goalie. He's right there as right at the top for Vezina for sure.
I am going to say 2-1 as well. So I think they'll win Monday, Tuesday.
Okay.
I think then at that point they'll call off the Dogs for Thursday's game against Nashville. You don't want to get anybody hurt in that game before the postseason starts. I think they'll use that as a little bit of a rest period. And so that'll be the one that they lose. And so my point being is that this Wild team's going to finish likely with 104 points on the season after 113 last year. 2 more wins would get them to 47 after 53 last year. And so it is amazing, considering how portions of this season have gone, that the difference was 6 wins.
Yeah, it's just crazy, right? We've talked about in previous episodes, just players only meetings. You lose your best player, Kirill Kaprizov. you lose another guy in Joel Eriksson Ek and all the defensive issues that this team has had. It's incredible. They've found a way, right? They've rode the wave. There's been so many ups and downs, and they're here. They're in the playoffs. All you can ask for is to get in the playoffs, and everybody has a chance. Then those 16 teams, anybody can win it at that point. And so it's been incredible. It's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of drama too with this Wild team, but they've made it interesting, and that's all you can ask for too.
Yeah, most definitely. Just an opportunity. And I think, as amazing as it is to say, considering what happened last year, this team is better suited for a postseason series this year than they were last year. But if this team goes and does what happened last year and loses in the first round, then it's no different. It's no different if you score 315 goals or 115 goals. If you don't collect those W's in the postseason, then it's just an L.
It would be such a relief for this franchise to finally get out of the first round.
I think the state of Minnesota collectively would appreciate a postseason series win.
That would make this season a success. Just getting out of the first round. I 100% agree with you. West 7th would go bananas for a series win. They'll take it whatever way they can get it. A sweep, game 7. We hope it doesn't have to involve a game 7 just because the nerves are just, we've seen it with this franchise a couple, postseasons in the past. And so it's just like, get the 4 wins, get it early if you can.
Yeah. Just give us something. I mean, Vikings, Timberwolves, Twins. It's been several minutes since anybody has had any sort of. I mean, the Twins are like 0-18 in their last 18 postseason games.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were probably in middle school, and that is crazy to think about. It's what a losing streak that is, and so. Yeah, give some hope, especially after a tough weekend for the Gophers losing in the national championship, where they had that 2-0 lead, and it ended in epic defeat there in overtime. So hopefully the Wild can bring some positivity for sure.
I wonder how many Gopher fans even were in their seats to be able to see it 10 seconds into overtime. People are probably still in line.
Right. You're coming back from the bathroom and the game's already over. It's that Simpsons meme or GIF where the guy walks in the door and then back out the door. So
whoop.
Yeah, it's tough. So yeah, hopefully the boys can bring some good vibes here to the state.
We'll have a full playoff preview for you, several of them, in fact. We'll have one that's kind of a head-to-head with whoever the Wild end up playing. We've got our full Locked on Wild panel locked in for another one. We'll get Kevin Gorgon as well. We got a lot going on for you next week. Depending on who the Wild end up playing, we don't know yet. Here's the final one. That second wild card spot, Winnipeg, Calgary, or Nashville, who wins it?
I think Winnipeg. I trust Connor Hellebuck to get them there. After the shenanigans that Jacob Markstrom has pulled recently, and Daryl Sutter, I can't see it, and I just think Nashville is too banged up. They still don't have Forsberg. It's tough. I just don't think they have the horses to try to leapfrog the other two teams.
Winnipeg plays at Colorado to finish their season. Nashville hosts the Wild. The Calgary Flames, on the final day of the regular season, they will be taking on the San Jose Sharks, which is why I am predicting that the Calgary Flames will end up taking that second wildcard spot in an epic meltdown by not only the Winnipeg Jets, but also the Nashville Predators. So we'll see what happens. A lot can change between now and then. We are down to the final 3 games of the season. So everyone, please enjoy the final bit of the regular season. then take the weekend to kind of reassess, refuel, and get ready to roll because postseason starts next week. And as mentioned, Locked On Wild will have you fully covered every step of the way from the start of the series to the end of the run. We've got you covered with new content here at Locked On Wild. So take this opportunity, if you haven't already, to subscribe and follow Locked On Wild on your favorite podcast platforms. Hit us up on YouTube. Flood that comment section so we can get some good Wild chatter going on with each one of our episodes. Also, make sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss out on any content throughout the week. We've got new episodes plus pre- and post-game content every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.